Vaccine passports. While we've been looking in other directions, they are being slowly yet deliberately introduced. Are vaccine passports necessary to reanimate public life, or are they the linchpin in a global surveillance network? There's 4.8 million of you, and I love every one of you miracles as you continue to awaken and march forward. If you're not a subscriber already, subscribe right now to get it up to that 5 million mark. All of us are chasing numbers. Why is it I want that? Why do I even care? Don't bother. Do what you want. What's wrong with me? I'm here to help you. I've not even told you anything yet. I'm here to talk to you explicitly and importantly about vaccine passports so we can understand together whether they are a necessary component in getting life back to normal, although I've really questioned those words and whether that's something that's even desirable, and if we're learning the right lessons, if normal and get back are the kind of things that we're, actually pursuing. Or is there a possibility that they're being used to create a global surveillance network? Let's have a look and see which one of those things it is. This is Judith Levine writing in The Intercept. There'll be a link to this article and you can read it yourself. The digital COVID vaccination certification or passport is a mobile app that instantaneously affirms the vaccinated status, COVID test results, birth date, gender, and/or other identifiers of its holder. The information is usually mosaiced in a QR code, read by a proprietary scanner and linked to a government registry. Led by New York, California, and Louisiana, as many as 30 states are rolling them out. So that's the majority. The Biden administration announced last spring that it would wrangle them under national standards, but so far it hasn't. Oh, they didn't keep a promise. There's a surprise. Internationally, the EU and a growing number of countries are adopting them, from repressive regimes like Bahrain to democracies like Denmark. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern heralded her country's My Vaccine Pass as the key card to the kingdom. It's actually really straightforward. Just shut up and do as you're told. It's actually really straightforward. If you've got a vaccine pass, you can do everything, she announced, flashing a friendly shark grin. Basically, that's it. Yeah, that is what's going on, isn't it? It's straightforward. Comply. Now, I'm not saying whether you should comply or whether you shouldn't comply. I wouldn't dare to have an opinion of something as personal to you and your freedom as that. But I am saying it's interesting when things are introduced that represent a significant shift in the way that we are governed and we're controlled and the way that information is used, particularly at a time when we're kind of aware, aren't we, that social media and big business cooperate with one another, when we're kind of aware, due to the revelations of Edward Snowden, that big data and countries like New Zealand through Five Eyes are involved. This isn't something that should be discussed and explained in reductive terms. Oh, it's simple. It's the keys to the kingdom. Whoop-de-doo. This is all of your information being stored on a government database without clear boundaries around how that information will be used. For a start, it includes already more than the nature of your COVID status or your vaccination status. So already it's being mobilized and used in other ways. For you not to ask questions about that and to accept it in the sort of simplistic terms in which it's been presented to you, you would have to be 100% certain that neither big tech nor the government have ever used data in a way that has negative outcomes, selfish outcomes, unclear outcomes, manipulative outcomes. Is that where you stand? Let me know in the comments below. Every government introducing a vaccine certification vows that their use is voluntary and no personal information will be held beyond its necessity. Well, these kind of declarations are all well and good, but let's look at recent history and see if it tallies. International bodies, including the World Health Organization, the EU, and the International Chamber of Commerce are crafting regulatory standards, but governments are far from unanimous even on such basics as whether you need to show the pass to enter a bar, much less on how long and by whom our intimate information will be held, owned, or overseen. I'm a little tired of those arguments of, yeah, but everyone's already got all that information anyway. I just feel like the collating, curating of that amount of data and handing it over to organisations that are notoriously either inept and incompetent or downright malfeasant certainly warrants investigation, discussion, democratic vote. All of these checks should be in the way, shouldn't they? Shouldn't be just, oh, don't worry about that, we just got all your information now. Wait, what? New York, for one, is not expecting to mothball the technology when COVID wanes. Oh, cool, exactly. So it's not just a temporary thing to get us through this pandemic, to reboot public life. No, it's the introduction of a technological facility that will be used how people decide it could be used as and when. Hey, why don't we just check all those things to see who dissidents are? Hey, why don't we just check who will be most interested in this product? Hey, why don't we check who we want going in and out of the country? Along with IBM, the designer, state bureaucrats are exploring how the platform could be retrofitted to verify other types of records and credentials, according to Vox. Experience with the Excelsior Pass has accelerated our thinking about digital government, said the architect of the program. Will President Joe Biden use the passport to enforce his federal employee vaccine mandate? Then what? Once biodata are collected and filed, cautioned Hamid Khan of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, there's no delete button. When biometric data, bodily attributes digitized, are married to surveillance technology, both the potential for profit and the ambitions of the techno-futurists inflate without limit. One industry analyst predicts the global biometrics market will grow 15% annually, reaching nearly 105 billion by 2028. The British tech firm Onfido envisions a seamless EU-wide identity verification or IDV system for online gambling, telemedicine, car rentals, electronic voting, and more. Scientists in academia and industry are working on a global biodata repository. It would be naive to assume these networks would not be linked. Because you can obviously see how this would line up with social credit score stuff and other dystopic speculations or realities in some countries. In 2020, Onfido called its immunity passport development the linchpin of a new normality in a post-COVID-19 society. This year, the company's chief privacy officer, an Orwellian job title if ever there was one, "I'm just here to ensure that privacy is absolutely observed. Now, could I have all of your data? What are you going to do with it? That's private." Told Biometric Update that proven immunity to the virus du jour might become a basic permission attribute. A Swedish company has introduced a vaccine certification microchip that can be implanted under the skin. We'll point you to that video after. During Italy's lockdown, the philosopher Giorgio Agamben blogged about the techno-medical despotism, so focused on eliminating the risk of contagion to preserve mere biological existence, what he calls bare life, that it prohibited everything that makes human society meaningful, from dating to democracy. How could we have accepted, he asked in a New York Times interview, in the name of a risk that we couldn't even quantify? Not only that the people who are dear to us should have to die alone, but also that this is something that's never happened before in all the history from Antigone today, that their corpses should be burned without a funeral. That's pretty incredible that technology is always presented to us as rational, as progress. Progress is the defining myth of our time. It's a pan-ideological agreement that we are improving, that we are growing. The only opposition to it are ecological concerns and perhaps a deep spiritual sense that you feel that what we're doing is not progressing in the direction of utopia but moving away from who we really are. And when that philosopher talks about basic values and fundamental principles and stories found in the birth of tragedy like Antigone not being able to bury her brother's body, it reminds us that there are certain things that are more valuable than convenience. And it's okay, it's just simple, it's the keys to the kingdom, just give us all your data, we'll be in control. That's not the kind of society that we want to participate in. What's happening, I feel, and this is what I fear, is we're not being included in the way that society is evolving, and it isn't evolving to our advantage. We're being told to look elsewhere, to get engaged in squabbles that may have important components to them, but in my opinion are not as important as what power is doing really. Nothing, obviously, by definition, is as important as what power is doing, because when power accumulates, big business, governments, their relationships, their ability to communicate and to control, well, that's how reality is going to be formed. That's what power does. It controls reality. It advances the interest that you want to see advanced. It prevents progress in other areas. So this is not a simple thing. This is an epochal decision that will define our species and the progress of our planet and our people for generations to come, if indeed there are generations to come. So you can see why people might contemplate conspiratorial stuff or be open to more marginal viewpoints, because something is happening at the centre that we're being told to look away from. Nothing to see here, this isn't important. But it seems to me to be quite fundamental to the way that reality and society is going to unfold in the forthcoming years. Actually, it's happened before. During the plagues of the Middle Ages, according to Foucault, the birthplace of the biopolitical state, Foucault talked about life politics, life itself becoming controlled, not just amenities and facilities, but life, what you do, what you say, what you think. But we don't have to look back that far to see a wish for perfect security trumping everything else that matters. The surveillance technologies on the war on contagion are inherited from the war on terror, and the software is encoded with the same forever war mentality. Both fight risk rather than actual threat. When the enemy is protean, like suicide bombers and viruses, the calculation of risk is easily manipulated and often subjective. It's easy to see how those perspectives align, how that mindset, that paradigm has evolved. Terrorism could potentially be anywhere. It can happen at any time. So no security measure we take is too advanced, too progressive, too draconian. Oh no, new viruses can come. Even now, when it seems globally, fingers crossed, that the current situation is improving, people tell you, oh no, have a look at, we've got a video on that. There will be new viruses all the time. We're going to need this technology. It could be argued that fear is being used to create very favourable circumstances for certain interests, i.e. give us your information and it's simple, when really we're moving in a direction that's pretty questionable. Certainly it's something that we should be open-minded to and have our eyes open about. Risk cloaked in statistics is a ghost in a suit. It starts to resemble a person. Who is the terrorist? Who is the COVID carrier? Among the contradictions of the pandemic is that collective safety requires honesty and mutual trust, yet the expression of that trust is vigilant mutual suspicion. The best bet is to fear everyone. That's a deeper kind of ideological and emotional component to the pandemic. It divides people. It makes us more suspicious. It creates conditions in which polarization is sort of a natural result, and the kind of quibbling and quarreling over minutiae and trivia can easily be amplified to drown out the noise of what's really important. The vaccination passport seems to solve this problem, replacing suspicion with certainty. But in admitting the vaccinated and deporting the unvaccinated, it also sorts the good bio-citizen from the outlaw. The rhetoric of contagion has long mobilised xenophobia and legitimised racist and eugenicist citizenship and immigration policies. University historian Alan M. Kraut calls this medicalised nativism. Look as well at how the media corroborates and cooperates with these narratives. At a time where something's happening that's incredibly important, wherever you stand on these issues, what's all over the newspapers, what's all over digital media, what's all over everyone's minds and feeds. Should Joe Rogan be cancelled? Is Joe Rogan allowed to say that? I think he should. I think he shouldn't. Meanwhile, shouldn't this be given equal attention and prominence in the media, given that this is much more likely to affect your life? If you don't want to listen to Joe Rogan, don't listen to Joe Rogan. Passports have everything to do with borders, says Janelle Johnson, Associate Professor of Rhetoric, Politics and Culture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and co-editor of Bio-Citizenship, The Politics of Bodies, Governance and Power. Securing borders is all about fear. The action of fear is to restrict movement. The passport allows for movement in both physical and economic ways. It also immediately suggests belonging, the people who belong and people who don't. And as soon as you've got polarised groups and opposition, people who are looking laterally instead of literally at where power actually is. The vaccine passport embodies the contradictions of the pandemic that birthed it. It guards borders. It divides us from them. It also facilitates travel, and travel is an antidote to tribalism. In either case, it's not going away. Therefore, if it is indeed the prototype linchpin of a future global digital hyper-surveillance apparatus, we must demand that it be universally accessible, publicly owned and regulated, its workings transparent, and its uses stringently defined. You know none of them things are going to happen right from the get-go right now, don't you? You know that this is something that will be gently eased in unless it's opposed. And the systems that are in place will facilitate it, because all of those systems will benefit from it. By systems, I mean the institutions of power, whether they are corporate or governmental. They will align perfectly over this issue. And you start to see how the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown narrative and the controls that have been introduced could be seen as facilitating particular outcomes that are hugely beneficial to a set of interests. Of course, what you're sold is convenience, it's easy, it's the keys to the kingdom. But reality might be, it's easy, it's simple, it's the keys to us being able to observe everything you're doing and control you while simultaneously making you really hate people that you live next door to because they see things slightly different, like they maybe like the Joe Rogan podcast and you don't, and that's what's important. Meanwhile, could we have a QR code for people that like Joe Rogan? You know, let's be a little bit cautious before allowing these things to happen. And if that litany of conditions are not provided, you know, transparency, voting on it, being clear about it, being able to opt out of it, discussing the ramifications, then you know what's happening. You don't need me to tell you. And that's fortunate, because this is probably one of those subjects where I have to be extremely cautious, because although there's 4.8 million of us and rising, we still have an awful lot to do. But that's just what I think. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this issue. Give us a like, subscribe to my channel, help me out, join this. If you enjoyed this video, there are a couple that I've mentioned that touch on similar themes and illuminate them further. Here they are, have a look at them. Sign up to my mailing list as well. I really want to be able to connect with you directly and tell you what I'm doing. For example, in March, April, May, I'm all over the UK in big venues doing a great show that you will love about these very topics and the solutions that we can collectively come to. Stay free.